Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. So recently I spotted this new to me palette from Kuratake. This is the Opal colors. And online it looks like you see right now. Like it looks like nothing. But I just knew that they would look amazing on dark cardstock. So this is my literal first time using them. I pulled them out, sprayed them all down with water. And then I grabbed a scrap of black cardstock and a piece of white just to show. Any sort of iridescent type watercolors, interference ones, powders, pearls, those sorts of things are similar to this. And there are a lot of them are made from the exact same bases. And in the effect of they look like nothing on white, but then you put them on black or just dark, like a dark base. And that's where the magic happens. And with these, same thing. So they look like nothing in the pan. They don't really look like much on white, but I'll show it in a minute here. When you tilt the white cardstock to the light, they're still really pretty. But on black cardstock, obviously, they're fabulous. It's got all these gorgeous colors. They don't need to be heat set. I only use my heat tool here just to dry them faster. Because I wanted to see them like dry on the paper, not reflecting like the water. So I dried them completely and like even on the white, they are pretty. I have ideas. But obviously on the black cardstock, they're just fabulous. I love them so much. They're so pretty. I'm so glad I got them. So I pulled out my go-to oldie but goodie favorite, Simon Says Stamps Beautiful Flowers stamp set that I have done a ton of videos. This is I think this is the 16th video. Yeah, I have an entire playlist. I will have it linked at the end of this video in the little end screen. So if you haven't checked it out, you can see all the videos I've done on this one and the Beautiful Flowers 2 stamp set. You guys know I love large florals. This was the first one though that just, So I pulled it out and I'm white heat embossing this big cluster just onto Simon's black cardstock. I am not using black watercolor paper. You can if you want to. Honestly, I have a bit of black watercolor paper here. I never use it. I just, there's no point. Black watercolor paper is more expensive, obviously. And also with things like this, you don't need it. I'm not layering. I'm not adding a bunch of water. That's when you want watercolor paper. If you're trying to do blends and you're adding a lot of water and that sort of a thing, you need watercolor paper because regular cardstock will pill and start to, come apart. But with anything like this, you just don't. I've never used watercolor paper for this. And I've done so many videos using the other Gansai Tambi palettes and, metallic palettes and just painting and just on black cardstock. And I've never had a problem. And I call this one easy because it is. You literally just paint. I'm not layering. You don't need to do any blending. You don't need to do anything fancy. You just fill it in. That's it. The whole magic of it is just how pretty these look on the black cardstock. Just that magic of the shimmery color. And the other thing I'll note is similar to, I would say these would be similar to other metallic watercolors in that I'm just painting the one layer. Again, I'm not layering them. I found that people have commented about other metallic watercolors in the past, different things. They're like, they look really chalky, that sort of a thing. Some do because they'll have some fillers in them and whatnot. But a lot of times it's because you're putting too much on. And if there's just this kind of overload of whatever metallic or pearlescent watercolor you're using, it will give that sort of chalky finish, which I'm not too concerned about when that happens. But again, try lightening it and just using just a little bit. So that's all I did here, was just paint in the areas. I used the kind of pinky opal color. I don't even have the names in front of me. It's called Opal Pink. It ends up looking more like a plummy sort of color, which is fabulous. So I used that for the blooms. I used the Opal Violet for I'll call them seed pods. And then of course the Opal Green for the leaves, as well as the Opal Gold. And that's it. And I ended up doing this multiple times because I thought, why not, when I've got everything out, do several, because I wanted to make more than one card. And then when everything was dry, I used the coordinating wafer die to die cut these And as always, my hair is piled up on top of my head and getting in the way. So I have old washi tape that I use to tape down my wafer dies. FYI, washi tape does dry out over the years. The stuff I'm using right now is old. I've had it for years and years. But after a few years, washi tape will dry out, just so you're aware. Like, you'll go to peel it off and it's just like paper. Like, there's no stick anymore. But that actually kind of comes in handy because I was using it for this, and I'll show that again in a minute. So I die cut my clusters. And I also die cut some black cardstock with one of Simon's Slimline nested rectangle wafer dies. And I have that die cut cardstock lined up in my MISTI. And then I just kind of arranged 2 of the floral clusters to figure out where I wanted them. And the sentiment is from the Thankful Flowers? Yes, Simon's Thankful Flowers stamp set, which is another all-time favorite of mine that I've done videos on. The sentiments especially are just, I reach for them all the time. So I stamped this thank you sentiment onto that black cardstock. Again, anti-static powder tool, brushed off the excess, inked up the stamp with Simon's clear embossing ink. And I stamped the sentiment twice just because it was a bit of a more solid sentiment. And then this time I heat embossed it with gold embossing powder, which is always fun to watch it melt. So then to figure out how to adhere my floral clusters, because they're die cut, I wanted to pop them up a bit, give it a bit of dimension. I didn't want to use cardstock for dimension like I've done in other things, because I'm going to cut this down, like cut off the parts hanging off. And if there was layers of cardstock, it's just a pain. So what I did was I used that washi tape to just hold the clusters in place where I'm going to adhere them. And because it's not sticky, it's not going to tear anything. It's not going to peel off the color. And then I flipped it over and I just used a pencil to trace on the back of those die cuts where the edge of the cardstock is. So then that way I'm only applying adhesive inside those pencil lines. And this will make it a lot easier in a second to adhere this back onto the die cut piece with the thank you on it. And then for my adhesive, I have this Studio Katia black foam tape. It doesn't have to be black. I just happen to have this huge roll of it. And I like this stuff. It's super sticky, like super sticky. So I coated the back of these die cuts inside the pencil lines with the black foam tape. And because my nails are currently little nubbins, especially my index finger, which I use to peel back all foam tapes, I had to trim all my nails down because they've been splitting thanks to like stress and dishwashing, you know, all the things. So I've trimmed them all down so I can't do nothing. Because I usually, when I have nails, I can like peel off backing, no problem. But if you have trouble with backing, either I've shown in videos using like the tip of my scissors, or here I'm using my little die release tool. It's got the, you know, pointed end. And I just use that to lift up the little corner of the foam tape and remove it. And then what I did was I just kept it upside down and then lined up the edges. And it's hard to see because my hair gets in the way. But I lined up the cardstock with those pencil lines. So then it just, easy done. And I'll repeat the process for the second card front. So I peeled off all the backing, left that upside down like that, lined up the cardstock with the pencil lines, and then I've got everything adhered into place. And then I can just flip this over again and I trim this off. And I know some people, this freaks them out because it's like, you wasted all that time coloring. No, it doesn't bother me at all. Plus, again, these didn't take very long. Like, that was the whole point, is to color these in. It was easy. If I had done Copic coloring and spent like 4 hours, you know, coloring these, I probably wouldn't have been able to trim off the excess, or I would have like saved it to put on, you know, the ends of something, because, you know, you put in a ton of time. Or I would only color the, you know, do a pencil line and only color the areas that are actually going to be used on the card, you know, just find ways to make it work. But I trimmed it off. It just looks better that way. And then I did add splatter, because of course. For the splatter, I used my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors palette, and I used the gold and the white gold from the palette and added all that splatter with my splat box and my paintbrush. And I set those aside, and while those are drying, I cut down my card bases, which are Simon's Heavyweight white cardstock, and I cut it to 7 inches by 8.5. And then I am scoring it at 3.5 with my Teflon bone folder. So these will be 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch slimline cards. So got those scored. I've had people asking, why do I use the Teflon bone folder versus the one that comes in the Score Buddy? game changer. I've talked about this for years. Whenever it was, you know, making the investment into the Teflon bone folder, because it's not a cheap little tool. And I remember when I got it back, you know, back in the day when it was a lot harder for me to get supplies, and serious game changer. And I've had this one for years now. It's been at least 5 years or so, something. And it's great. It's amazing. I love it. Like, I used to go through those little plastic bone folders, like, at least 1 or 2 a year, because they just wear out. Like, it literally wears right down and it won't score anymore. Teflon one, worth it. Worth every penny. Most used tool, because I use it on literally every single card. So, anywho, the card base, I folded inside out, put it back in my MISTI with the large floral cluster. And I'm actually using Wendy Vecchi's Make Art ink in Thistle. This plummy purple just went really, really well with how those flowers turned out on the card front. So I lined up the stamp from the Beautiful Flower set on the inside of the card there, inking it up with that Thistle ink, then stamping it onto the inside of the card. Once I have both card bases stamped, I'm just going to move it down to the bottom because it's just easier to line up. And I'm going to line up this big sentiment from that Thankful Flowers stamp set that I just love. It's the perfect sentiment for thank you cards, which are my most used type of cards, that says you couldn't be more awesome. And that I inked up with VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink and stamped that onto the inside of the card as well. People ask me about that too when I stamp on the insides of cards, you know, like, yeah, you're not leaving enough space to write anything, etc. I will write right over the things I stamp. It's the inside of the card, I don't worry about it. Or it, depending if I'm like writing a really long message, I'll write on the top portion of the inside, you know, or on the back of the card. I don't care. I'll just write. And I have no problem writing right over the images I stamped, that sort of a thing. So sometimes I'll write around it. It just depends, you know. I don't worry about it too much. So anywho, I adhered my card fronts. The splatter has dried, so I adhered those to the card base with just some Kuratake glue. And then as a final little bit of embellishment, I have these Lilac Blooms sequin mix from a previous Simon release as well. This entire card is like all oldies but goodies favorites. And again, these sequins, just that, almost that kind of plummy purpley sort of color, which was, again, perfect to go with the color for the flowers of this card. So I adhered those into place with some Kuratake glue, and then I paired these cards with some black Slimline envelopes. And here is the metallic goodness. I love this watercolor palette. It's so pretty. Love. And I love this stamp set. Obviously, because I've done a bajillion videos using it. I've made so many cards. And new ideas keep popping up every once in a while. So, as always, I will link below the video to my blog post. I will have pictures in my blog post, picture links to all the supplies used, all that info. You can check it out in the description box below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for commenting, thumbs upping, subscribing, all of it. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!